Hello, everyone. Tonight, we're diving into a story that starts with candlelight and roast beef, but ends with betrayal, a pregnancy, and a whisper that shattered everything I thought I knew. Imagine sitting at a polished mahogany table, crystal glasses catching the chandelier's golden glow. Your son is laughing, your husband's eating quietly, and your daughter-in-law, well, she's glowing in a way that doesn't feel maternal, but victorious. That was me. That was the last peaceful moment I had before my family cracked like porcelain. This story is true, and let me tell you, if it had happened to someone else, I wouldn't have believed they survived it with their sanity intact. So, before you get too comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And comment below with where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far my stories reach. Now, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan hum softly in the background, and let's begin tonight's journey. It was a Tuesday evening in September, crisp air outside, but warm in the dining room. Cedric had installed that chandelier for our 20th anniversary. My grandmother's china gleamed in the light, and the roast I'd spent all afternoon on was resting proudly at the centre of the table. Everything looked perfect. Judd, our son, grinned at me with that boyish charm he never quite lost. "Bessie, you've outdone yourself," he said, slicing into his steak like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. His wife Lilia, perched across from me in a forest green dress that hugged her perfectly flat stomach, gave a saccharine smile. Mother Bessie is such a wonderful cook, and so devoted. Devoted? She said it like an accusation. There was something in the air like the stillness before a thunderstorm. I looked at Cedric, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He hadn't, really, for weeks. "I've been thinking about vows," Lilia said, dabbing her napkin to her lips, "about what it means to be truly committed through all kinds of challenges." She gave Cedric a look. He flinched. Judd beamed. "Marriage is about building something together, or sometimes sharing what's already been built," Lilia said. Something inside me turned cold. Then she stood, smoothed her dress, and said, "I have news. I'm pregnant." Judd's chair nearly toppled as he jumped up. "Lilia, that's amazing!" He turned to us, his face lit with joy. "Mum, Dad, you're going to be grandparents." I clapped lightly. I smiled. I even said congratulations, but I couldn't stop watching Lilia, who was watching Cedric, and smiling. And then she leaned toward me. She didn't hug me. She didn't whisper a thank you. She whispered, "I'm pregnant with your husband's baby. You tacky old woman." My world tipped. My heart tried to climb out of my chest. But instead of screaming, I laughed. A clear, sharp laugh that made even Judd stop pouring champagne. "Don't worry, dear," I said. "Everything will work out just fine." And oh, it would. That night, sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I lay in bed next to Cedric, listening to the slow, deliberate rhythm of his breathing, pretending the world hadn't shifted under my feet just hours earlier. He slept like nothing had happened, like our daughter-in-law hadn't whispered a nuclear bomb into my ear over dinner. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above, hypnotic and meaningless. My body was still, but my thoughts raced. At 65, I thought I had reached a place of quiet certainty. You think you know a man after 43 years of marriage. You think you know your son. You think you understand the rhythms of your own life. But betrayal has a way of cutting sharper when it comes from within the walls you built. The next morning, Cedric sat at our little breakfast table, sipping black coffee and reading the newspaper as if everything was fine. I placed his toast whole wheat, cut diagonally on a plate in front of him. "Sleep well?" he asked. not looking up. Fine, I lied. The lie tasted bitter, like burnt coffee grounds. He talked about needing to prune the roses before the frost hit. I watched him over my cup, studying the slope of his shoulders, the creases beside his eyes, the lips that kissed me every morning for 4 decades. Was it guilt he wore now, or just the weight of routine? While he worked in the garden, I cleaned the already clean house, folding laundry with the precision of a woman holding herself together one task at a time. I needed something, anything to explain what had happened, and maybe, just maybe, a clue that I wasn't crazy. 3 weeks ago, Cedric had started showering at strange times after gardening, before dinner, even mid-morning. He said he didn't want to smell like fertilizer. I chalked it up to aging. Now, it felt like evidence. 2 weeks ago, I found a receipt for a jewellery store 2 towns over. He told me it was for my birthday. 4 months away. I believed him. Foolishly. 6 days ago, Lilia showed up while Judd was at work again. She said she wanted to learn my casserole recipe. She stayed for hours, circling Cedric like a well-dressed vulture. Now I saw the puzzle forming. Around noon, Lilia's silver sedan pulled into the driveway. I stood at the living room window, hidden behind the curtains, as she glided out of her car in a sundress, like she was walking a red carpet. She made her way around to the backyard, toward the garden, toward Cedric. I held my breath, watched, waited. They spoke close, too close. Her hand touched his forearm, and she laughed that rehearsed, glassy laugh of hers. Cedric actually smiled. I hadn't seen him smile at me like that in months. My stomach clenched. She left shortly after, and Cedric returned to the house lighter, almost cheerful. At dinner, he talked about tulip bulbs like nothing had happened. I nodded, played the part, said nothing. But inside I was building a quiet case. The next morning, I waited until Cedric left for his routine doctor's appointment. Then I crept up to his study. We had a rule that room was his sanctuary, but that rule was written before secrets filled our home. The room smelled like aftershave and ink. I moved slowly, opening drawers like diffusing a bomb, paper clips, business cards, gardening catalogues, and then beneath a pile of useless brochures I found them. Bank statements, from an account I didn't know existed. Large deposits, thousands, withdrawals in cash. I took photos with my phone, hands trembling. Then I heard a car. Lilia. Again. But this time, instead of visiting Cedric, she walked straight to Marcus the gardener. I recognized the manila envelope she pulled from her purse. Money. She was paying him. Why? Before I could unravel it, Judd's car pulled up. He called to her, hugged her, spun her like they were high school sweethearts. She played the part of devoted wife. I watched her from the kitchen window as she wrapped herself around my son, the same way she had wrapped herself around this entire house. They came inside. I smiled, made tea, pretended everything was normal. But I knew better now. I was no longer looking for comfort. I was looking for the truth. And by God, I was going to find it. By Friday morning, I had memorized the cracks in our kitchen floor. I'd traced them with my toe like battle maps, plotting out my next move. Cedric was out early again, hardware store, he said, for garden tools. But I no longer trusted his errands or his explanations. The hardware store might have been a greenhouse or a motel for all I knew. With him gone and the house quiet, I climbed the stairs again, not to Cedric's study this time, but to Judd's old bedroom, the guest room, the room Lilia had gradually begun to colonize with silk scarves and high-end lotions like she was leaving breadcrumbs of possession. She called them little touches. I called them red flags. The drawers held nothing special: folded clothes, luxury cosmetics, a stack of maternity magazines I doubted she actually read. It was in the bottom drawer, hidden beneath a soft cashmere cardigan, that I found it a manila folder, thicker than it should have been. Inside were bank statements in Judd's name. Transactions I knew weren't his, massive withdrawals, credit card bills for cards I'd never seen, a spreadsheet written in Lilia's delicate script with line items like Northwestern Mutual, $45,000 emergency fund, $12,000 and personal loan M. Santos, $18,000. M. Santos. Marcus. My pulse thudded in my ears. I photographed every page, careful not to crease anything. As I slid the folder back, I heard it again. Lilia's voice downstairs, as cheerful and false as a reality TV apology. Bessie, just popping in. Of course, she always popped in. I raced downstairs, pasted on my smile. Would you like some coffee? Sure, she purred, making herself at home at my kitchen table, her hands folded over her fake belly bump, like a princess receiving guests. Eat. You seem tired, she said, sipping daintily. Didn't sleep well, I replied. I imagine not. Pregnancy can really stir things up in a family. She said it like she'd just stirred a pitcher of lemonade. She talked while I stirred cream into her coffee. I barely listened. My mind was still upstairs with the folder, with the numbers, with the way Cedric had looked at me the night before, as if he wanted to tell me something, but couldn't. Why did you tell Cedric about the baby before Juddy asked suddenly? She blinked, just for a second, then smiled. Oh, I needed reassurance. Cedric has always been so supportive. Supportive, I repeated. That's one word. She leaned forward conspiratorially. He's been worried about me, financial stress and all. You understand how hard things are for young couples. And what exactly has he been doing to help? She held my gaze, her smile unblinking, just being kind, protective, offering support where it's needed. Like a father figure. Like family, she said. It was a battle of masks. Hers barely slipped, but mine had been off for days. I wasn't acting anymore. I was observing. Then, through the window, I saw them, Cedric and Marcus, in the garden again, talking, not pruning, not discussing fertilizer, talking. Lilia stood abruptly. Excuse me, she said. I need to speak to them. She didn't even finish her coffee. I followed, silently, positioning myself behind the open window where I could hear everything without being seen. I can't do this anymore, Marcus said. His voice trembled. This isn't right. Lilia hissed. We've been through this. You promised. Judd's a good man. He doesn't deserve. Enough, she snapped. That was when I stepped out. What doesn't he deserve? 3 heads turned like guilty children caught in the pantry. Marcus looked like he might vomit. Cedric went pale. And Lilia, her face flashed with something between rage and calculation. Bess, Cedric said, like he was announcing a natural disaster. I live here, I said, my voice steady. If there's a secret conference in my backyard, I think I'm entitled to a seat. Marcus took a shaky breath. Mrs. Holloway, I can't do it anymore. Do what? Lilia's lips thinned. Marcus. No, he said. She needs to know. Everything. Cedric looked at the sky like he was praying for rain or divine intervention. He's been protecting Judd, Marcus said. Because of the gambling, because of the debts. Lilia, she's been using it all to manipulate him, to control this family. Lilia rolled her eyes. That's dramatic. He's right, Cedric said softly. Judd owes over $100,000. online gambling, sports betting. Lilia found out, and instead of helping him, she dug him deeper. Then she came to me, said if I didn't help her, she'd expose Judd, ruin him. She asked you to pretend to be the father, I whispered. Cedric nodded. And the baby? Marcus looked down. It's mine. The air left my lungs in one clean whoosh. I felt my knees buckle and gripped the garden table for balance. Lilia just smiled, smooth as ice. Now that we're all being honest, she said, what are you going to do about it? And that was the moment I decided I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't cry, I wouldn't run. I would end this, my way. Saturday morning brought a strange kind of calm, the still, eerie hush you get right before a thunderstorm. Cedric was quiet, hovering around me like a ghost, unsure whether to speak or vanish entirely. We'd barely exchanged more than a handful of words since the garden confrontation, but in truth, I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. Not until I had something more than grief and betrayal to stand on. Because here's the thing about betrayal, it's not always the affair that breaks you. It's the months of lying that erode you slowly, like water under a foundation. It's realizing the person who used to finish your sentences now finishes them in silence to avoid telling you the truth. So while Cedric walked on eggshells and Lilia continued her Oscar-worthy performance as a glowing mother-to-be, I did what any old woman with a working brain and a decent internet connection would do. I made tea, pulled out my tablet, and started researching how to obtain DNA paternity results during pregnancy. I wasn't looking for revenge, not yet. I was looking for certainty. And that's when fate handed me a silver platter. I was in the upstairs guest bathroom, the one Lilia had practically claimed as her own when I found it. A long, white envelope tucked behind the trash can, barely visible. She must have dropped it. The return address said Gene Tech Laboratories, and my hands were suddenly too warm. I opened it slowly, like peeling back the skin of something rotten. DNA test results. Mother Lilia, Catherine Holloway. Alleged father 1, Judd Michael Holloway. Excluded, 0% match. Alleged father 2, Marcus Daniel Santos. Not excluded, 99.7% match. I sat on the closed toilet seat, the letter trembling in my fingers. There it was. Not just the truth, but proof. The baby wasn't Judd's. It wasn't Cedric's. It was Marcus's. And yet, Lilia had been spinning a tale involving my husband for weeks. So why the DNA test? Why keep this piece of information? The answer hit me like a brick wrapped in velvet insurance. Lilia never did anything without motive. She was keeping her options open. With this test, she could twist any narrative she needed. She could accuse Cedric if needed, blackmail Marcus if necessary, shift the paternity story to suit her next power move. She wasn't just playing the game, she'd built the damn board. I folded the paper carefully, tucking it into the inside pocket of my cardigan, and just as I did, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Bessie Lilia's voice chirped down the hallway. You up there? I took a deep breath and smoothed my face into neutral. In here, I called, turning the faucet on to cover the silence. She peeked around the corner like a cat in silk. Oh, just wanted to make sure I didn't leave the water running. All turned off, I said, stepping away from the sink. Old pipes. I like to double-check. Her eyes darted around, casual but searching. Everything okay? I asked. She smiled. Too fast? Of course. Just a little pregnancy brain. You know I lose everything these days. Have you lost something recently? Maybe. She tilted her head, watching me too closely. An envelope? Maybe. Did you happen to see one? I kept my hands at my sides. No, I lied smoothly. Nothing at all. She smiled again, this time slower, cooler. I'm sure it'll turn up, she said, voice like honey laced with lemon. I nodded. Important things usually do. After she left, I didn't move. I just stood there staring at the mirror, gripping the edge of the sink. I had proof now. Real, undeniable, paper proof. I could expose her lies, save Judd, free Cedric. But truth is never clean. It always leaves bruises. And my son, my sweet, foolish Judd, still thought he was going to be a father. Later that evening, I found Cedric in his study. He looked smaller than I remembered, shrunken from shame. I know you're not the father, I said quietly. He froze. She left proof in the bathroom. His eyes went wide. You found it. I did. He buried his face in his hands. I didn't know. Bess. I never touched her. I never would. I just thought. I thought if I let her tell the story her way, I could protect Judd. You should have come to me, I said, not angry, just tired. I'm your wife, not some fragile glass you're trying not to break. Cedric's voice cracked. I just didn't want you to look at Judd the way you looked at your father. That cut deep. My father was a gambler. He lost our house when I was 16. The shame stayed with me longer than the homelessness. So yes, I understood. But now it was time to stop understanding and start acting. Because Sunday was coming. And I had a dinner to plan. Sunday arrived like Judgment Day in a casserole dish. The house smelled like pot roast and slow-baked apples, Judd's favourite meal since he was 8. I set the table with our wedding china, the same set I used when we first brought him home from the hospital, when Cedric and I still believed love and hard work were all a child needed to grow up safe. I polished the silver, not because anyone would notice, but because I needed something, anything to feel clean in all this mess. Cedric hovered, watching me work, torn between offering to help and knowing better than to interrupt my process. We could still call it off, he said. No, I replied, not looking up. She's expecting a show. I want to give her a performance she won't forget. Cedric sighed. Do you want me to say something during dinner? No, you just smile and pass the butter. He almost chuckled. Almost. At 6:05 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Judd standing there with a bottle of sparkling cider and the biggest, most naive smile on his face. Lilia stood beside him in a pale yellow maternity dress that glowed under the porch light. Her hand rested delicately on her bump, like she'd trained with royalty. Mum. The house smells amazing, Judd beamed, just like old times. Bessie, Lilia said, air kissing my cheek. This is so generous. Family is always worth it, I said, motioning them in. She blinked one beat too long. She couldn't read me anymore, and that unsettled her. The 4 of us sat down. Candles flickered. The roast glistened. Crystal clinked gently. It was a scene straight out of a Norman Rockwell painting, if Rockwell had ever painted domestic warfare. We made small talk. Pregnancy cravings, Cedric's garden, Judd's work stress. I listened, nodded, smiled. Lilia was waiting, watching for me to crack, but I didn't. Then, over dessert, I made my move. You know, I began casually, slicing into the apple pie. I've been reading a lot about genetics lately. Oh, Lilia said, eyes narrowing. Yes, it's amazing what modern science can tell us about a baby before it's even born. Cedric reached for his wine glass, not to drink, but to steady his hand. Paternity tests. For instance, I continued, incredible accuracy, practically courtroom-level certainty. Judd chuckled. You mean like ancestry kits? Among other things, I said sweetly, but those are just recreational. The real ones, like the ones used by labs, are much more precise, especially when you want to know who a baby's father is. Lilia's fork paused mid-air. What an odd topic, she said lightly, her voice higher than usual. I smiled and stood. I thought so too, until I found this in my guest bathroom. I retrieved the envelope from the buffet table, placed it delicately in front of her. Silence. Judd looked confused. Cedric looked like he wanted to melt into the wallpaper. Lilia didn't touch the envelope, but her jaw tightened ever so slightly. Judd reached for it. Judd, Lilia said softly, almost a plea. He opened it. He read it. He turned pale. What is this? He whispered. No one answered. He looked at Cedric, then at Lilia, then at me. Is this a joke? Lilia stayed silent, but her knuckles turned white on the tablecloth. Marcus Santos, Judd asked, voice shaking, the gardener. Still no response. The baby isn't mine. His voice broke on the last word. No, I said softly. I can explain, Lilia said finally, but it was too late. Judd stood up so fast his chair screeched. You manipulated me, he said. You knew I was vulnerable. You knew about the gambling. You encouraged it, Cedric added quietly, then used it as leverage. Judd's eyes filled with tears. Why? Lilia's mask crumbled because I had nothing, she hissed. No family, no money, no future, and you were a golden ticket until your mother started asking questions. I stood slowly. You could have had a future here. You could have been loved. I didn't want love, she snapped. I wanted control. Well, I said, pushing back my chair, you're about to lose all of it. Lilia stared at us all, eyes wild. You can't just throw me out. I'm carrying a child. Marcus's child. I corrected, and don't worry. He'll know. I've already made contact. Her face contorted. You went behind my back. You went behind my son's entire life, I replied. Cedric rose beside me, tall and resolute. You need to leave, Lilia, tonight. Judd sat down heavily, his world crumbling beneath him. I loved you, he said softly, or I thought I did. Lilia picked up her purse, head held high, but the illusion was broken. Her power had been rooted in secrecy, and now that was gone. As the front door clicked shut behind her, Cedric put his hand on my shoulder. She's gone, he whispered. Yes, I said, but the work is just beginning. And it was, because rebuilding a family doesn't start with forgiveness. It starts with truth. The house felt different once the door shut behind Lilia. Lighter, almost, like someone had opened a window and let out the sour air. But freedom has its own heaviness too, especially when it comes at the price of your son's broken heart. Judd sat at the dining table, head in his hands, shoulders hunched like a little boy who'd scraped his knees too hard to cry about it. I didn't say anything at first. I let the silence wrap around us. Cedric was the one who broke it. Son, he said gently, sliding a glass of water across the table, there's something else you should know. Judd looked up, face flushed, eyes red. More, he asked bitterly. What else? Was the house built on ancient burial grounds? Is my real mother a Romanian countess? I almost smiled, almost. Cedric leaned forward, his voice low and even. I let her lie. I let you believe I was the one involved. I did it to protect you. Judd blinked. Wait, so you weren't? I never touched her, Cedric said firmly. Not once. She blackmailed me with your debts, said she'd tell everyone you were gambling again unless I played along. Judd's expression cracked further. I can't believe this. I'm God. I'm such an idiot. No, you're human, I said softly, walking over to sit beside him. You made mistakes. Yes, but she built a trap out of them. That isn't love. That's exploitation. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for a year. It started with harmless bets, he muttered, fantasy leagues, then sports books. 1 win turned into 3 losses. I tried to quit. I really did. And we're going to help you now, I said, if you let us. For the first time all night, his face softened. You're not ashamed of me, he asked. I'm your mother, I said, brushing his hair from his forehead the way I did when he was 10. I can be angry, disappointed, hurt, but never ashamed, not if you're willing to face it. He nodded slowly, like a man who had finally spotted dry land after drifting for too long. Over the next few weeks, things moved fast. Cedric and I sat down with a lawyer and froze all access to family assets Lilia might have touched. Judd entered a Gamblers Anonymous program on the east side, quiet church basement meetings, stale coffee, and a circle of worn faces who understood him in a way we never could. He never missed a session. Meanwhile, I reached out to Marcus. He hadn't returned any of our messages since leaving, but I sent him a handwritten letter, yes, in cursive, on real stationery. I told him about the DNA test, about Judd knowing the truth, about Lilia's exit. I didn't expect him to write back. But he did. A week later, a letter arrived with a Phoenix postmark. Inside was a simple message. Mrs. Holloway, I never meant to hurt anyone. I hope David, our son, grows up with more honesty than we had. Thank you for treating the truth with more grace than I deserved. Marcus. There was a photo enclosed. A baby boy with a tuft of dark hair and Marcus's wide, gentle eyes. His little fist was curled around the edge of a blue blanket. On the back, Lilia had written David, born March 2nd. Thank you for the second chance. I showed it to Judd, unsure how he'd react. He stared for a long time, silent. Then, quietly, he whispered, He looks nothing like me. No, I agreed. He doesn't. He handed the photo back. That's okay. A month later, Judd met someone at his support group. Sarah, a social worker with a dry sense of humour and the patience of a saint. She didn't care about his past. She cared about his effort. And Judd, for once, didn't try to impress her. He just showed up, as he was. They started dating, slowly, cautiously, like people who knew how easy it was to fall into the wrong kind of love. And Cedric and I, we didn't talk much about Lilia anymore. Sometimes silence is a form of healing too. We gardened. We cooked together. We shared crossword puzzles and quiet mornings. Once, while folding laundry, Cedric looked at me and said, I don't deserve you. I shrugged. Probably not, but I'm stubborn. He laughed, and for the first time in a long time, it sounded real. We were still piecing things back together. Yes, but piece by piece, something stronger was forming. Not because we fought dirty, but because we held each other up when the house of cards fell. And we knew how to rebuild. Spring rolled in with soft breezes and blooming hydrangeas, the kind that made you believe life could be beautiful again. Even after everything had been pulled apart, I spent my mornings with my fingers in the dirt, pruning rose bushes that had survived far more than frost. Gardening had always been a quiet therapy for me. Now, it felt like communion. But peace, as you know, is rarely permanent. It was a Thursday afternoon when I received the call. Unknown number, Arizona area code. I almost didn't answer. But something told me I needed to. Bessie Holloway. The voice on the other end asked, female, young, professional. Yes, speaking. This is Clarissa Morales. I'm calling on behalf of Family Protective Services in Maricopa County. We have a situation involving Ms. Lilia Holloway and a minor child named David Santos. I believe you're listed as a point of emergency contact. My blood ran cold. I'm sorry. I don't understand. Why me? She listed you as a relative and fallback guardian in case of emergency. Emergency. There's been a domestic incident. Ms. Holloway has been taken into custody for endangerment. We're contacting relatives to discuss temporary guardianship of the child. Endangerment. The word hit like ice water to the chest. How is the baby? I asked quietly. He's safe, currently with emergency foster care, but he can't stay there long. We're required to notify all viable relatives. I thanked her, got off the phone, sat in my garden chair for a full 15 minutes, just staring at the earth, watching a ladybug crawl along the edge of a trowel. Cedric found me there, hands still in my lap, phone resting face down on the table. What's wrong? Lilia's been arrested. I said, they want us to take the baby. He blinked. David? I nodded. She put me down as the guardian, I added, voice hollow, like some last chess move she forgot to finish. Cedric sat beside me. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I swore I was done with her, I whispered, but this isn't her. This is a child. The next 48 hours passed in a flurry of phone calls, paperwork, video interviews. Clarissa was kind, patient, but thorough. We had to pass background checks, show proof of stable income, even submit references. It felt invasive but necessary. Judd was the last person I told. He had a right to know. When I finished explaining, he was silent for a long while. Do you want to see him? I asked. He shrugged. I don't know. Part of me does. Part of me wants to forget any of this ever happened. I understand. He hesitated, but he didn't ask to be born into this mess. No, I agreed, he didn't. And so, a week later, Cedric and I flew to Phoenix. A social worker brought David into the visitation room wrapped in a yellow blanket. He was smaller than I expected, but healthy. His eyes were wide and curious, and when I held him, something shifted inside me. A knot I didn't know I'd been carrying loosened. Cedric stood behind me, one hand on my shoulder. Neither of us said a word. A few hours later, we brought him home. It wasn't easy. Bottle feedings at 2 a.m., diaper explosions during Judge Judy, the cries that came not from hunger, but from not knowing where he belonged. And yet, it was healing. Not just for me, but for all of us. Judd came by more often. At first, just to drop off supplies, baby wipes, formula, tiny socks with dinosaurs, then to stay for dinner, then to hold David for a while, even if he didn't say much. This doesn't make me his father, he said one night. No, I said gently, but it makes you someone who shows up. He nodded, eyes glistening. Sarah came too. She was a natural with babies, knew how to bounce them just right, how to hum that weird, tuneless melody that somehow calmed them down. She and Judd took shifts helping us whenever they could. We were becoming a unit again. Not a traditional family, not anymore. But something that looked enough like love to count. As for Lilia, her court date came and went. She pled guilty to negligence. Her sentence included community service, counselling, and a mandatory parenting course. She was not allowed unsupervised visitation. She never contacted us again. I kept the DNA test in a locked drawer, not because I needed the proof anymore, but because some truths deserve to be remembered not in bitterness, but as warning signs for the future. Because here's something age has taught me: the past doesn't go away. But it doesn't have to define you. And sometimes, from the rubble of manipulation and grief, something unexpected can grow a quiet kind of grace, wrapped in a soft blanket, staring at you with trusting eyes. And just like that, you know you've got one more fight in you. And this time, you're not fighting for revenge. You're fighting for what matters most. Summer unfolded slowly, like a well-worn blanket finally getting some sun. David grew by the week, his tiny legs getting chunkier, his laugh gurgling louder with every silly face Cedric made. Our house, once quiet and heavy, now buzzed with the sounds of new life, tiny socks drying near the window, lullabies humming in the background, and the gentle creak of the rocking chair Cedric dusted off from the attic. We were, unexpectedly, a family again, not one anyone would have predicted, but one forged in fire and resilience. One afternoon, I took David to the local park. He loved the swings. Though he was still too small for them, I'd hold him in my lap and sway slowly, feeling the breeze kiss our cheeks. Other parents, young, smooth-skinned and sleepless, would glance at me with polite curiosity. One woman asked, "Your grandson?" I smiled. "Yes, something like that." She grinned, nodding, but I could feel her curiosity lingering. It didn't matter. I didn't owe anyone our story, but it was ours, and I was beginning to be proud of that. Judd began coming every Saturday. At first, he stayed only an hour, then 2, then the whole day. He'd bring toys, snacks, even a second-hand stroller he found online that looked practically brand new. I watched him with David, hesitant at first, but growing steadier. One day, as David napped in the carrier strapped to Judd's chest, Judd looked at me and said, "Do you think he'll hate me for not being his real dad?" I shook my head. "No, because you'll show him what a real dad looks like." His eyes watered. He nodded, lips pressed tightly together. I didn't need to say more. He was becoming the kind of man I hadn't seen in him in years, someone stronger, not because he had power, but because he finally understood humility. Sarah came too. She'd sit next to Judd and hold David with a gentle rhythm that made it look effortless. And in those quiet moments, I allowed myself the smallest sliver of hope that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected child had knit us together in a way that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Then, one Sunday afternoon, while folding laundry, Cedric came into the room holding an envelope. "You might want to see this," he said, handing it to me. It was from a law firm in Phoenix. The name rang no bells. Inside was a legal letter. Lilia was formally signing over her parental rights. Full custody of David would be granted to us, pending final court approval, no fight, no appeal. There was a handwritten note attached. "I've made too many mistakes. I'm not fit to be his mother. Do what I never could, Elle." I stared at the note for a long time. My hands trembled, not from sadness, but from release. "This is it," I whispered. "She's really gone." Cedric nodded. "We can adopt him." I looked out the window where David slept in his crib, sunlight soft on his face. "Let's do it," I said. "Let's make this official." The adoption process wasn't easy. There were interviews, home visits, more paperwork than I thought possible, but the caseworker, Clarissa, remembered us. She supported the transition. She saw the love in our home. The court date was set. On the morning of the hearing, I dressed David in a tiny navy vest and khaki pants. Judd showed up in a collared shirt and clean shoes, hair combed for once. Sarah wore pale blue. Cedric held my hand the entire time. When the judge asked if we understood what adopting David meant, every responsibility, every sacrifice, I said yes without hesitation. Because I'd already done the hardest part. I had let go of the life I thought we'd have, and embraced the one we were building. The judge smiled, banged her gavel. It is the order of this court that David Elias Santos shall henceforth be known as David Elias Holloway. Just like that, he was ours. Afterward, we celebrated at home with cupcakes and apple cider. David smashed frosting in his hair. Judd took photos. Cedric poured cider like it was champagne. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across our garden, Judd pulled me aside. "I've decided something," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "I want to be David's godfather. Not legally, just someone he can look up to. When he's old enough, I'll tell him the truth, but I want him to know he's wanted, that he's safe, that he's family." I hugged him tight. "He already knows, Judd. He already knows." Later that evening, after the house quieted down and the last cupcake wrapper was thrown away, Cedric and I sat on the porch swing with David asleep in my arms. "We're old for this," he said with a chuckle. "Maybe," I replied, "but I don't think we were done yet." He kissed my temple. "You're something else, Bessie." "No," I murmured. "I'm just a woman who stopped waiting for people to do the right thing and decided to do it herself." We sat there, the three of us, wrapped in the glow of porch lights and second chances. And I realised for the first time in years I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Cedric, not at Judd, not even at Lilia. Because in the ruins of her deceit, a new life had begun. One that, this time, I would protect with everything I had. Fall arrived with crisp leaves and a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. David was crawling now fast, curious, always chasing something invisible. His laughter filled the rooms, echoing off the walls that had once held silence and shame. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt alive. We baby-proofed the kitchen, bought padded corners for the coffee table. Judd helped install a safety gate at the top of the stairs, cursing under his breath while Sarah read the instructions upside down, giggling. I watched them from the hallway, heart swelling with something I couldn't quite name gratitude, maybe, or the quiet realization that healing doesn't come in a grand moment. It comes slowly, piece by piece, in the everyday. One afternoon, I found a photo album in the attic. It was dusty and cracked, filled with Polaroids from the early days Judd as a baby in the same crib David now used, Cedric holding him proudly, me in the background with that dazed new mother look. I brought it down and set it on the kitchen table. When Judd arrived that evening, I flipped it open for him. "I forgot how much hair you had," I teased. He laughed, shaking his head, and I forgot how good Dad's moustache used to be. We sat there for over an hour, passing photos back and forth like memories we were finally ready to revisit. For a long time, we hadn't been able to talk about the past without pain. Now, it felt like we were building a bridge back to each other. Later, after dinner, Judd stayed behind as Sarah left for work. He cleared his throat. "I've been thinking." I raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous?" He smiled, but his tone shifted. About my future, about David, about us. You've come a long way, I said. I'm proud of you. He looked down at his hands. I want to do more. For you, for him, for myself. I talked to a friend from my support group. He's starting a non-profit that works with people recovering from gambling addiction, counselling, job placement, mentorship. I think I want in. My heart jumped. You'd be great at that. I've been through it. I know the signs, the shame, the spiral. Maybe I can stop someone else before they hit the bottom. I reached across the table and took his hand. This is the best version of you I've ever seen. He smiled, tears brimming but not falling. That night, as I tucked David in and watched his tiny chest rise and fall, I thought about legacy, not the kind written in wills or measured in bank accounts, but the kind that's etched in how you show up for the people you love, the kind that whispers, I was here and I mattered. And just when I thought life had finally given us a calm chapter, a letter arrived. From Lilia. It was addressed to David. I stared at the envelope for hours before opening it. Inside was a single page, written in neat cursive. Dear David, I don't expect you to understand me. I don't even expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that letting you go was the hardest thing I've ever done. And the only selfless thing I may have ever done. You're with the people who will love you better than I ever could. You were never a mistake. You were the one beautiful thing I gave to the world. Be kind, be strong. And if someday you wonder why I disappeared, it's because I loved you too much to let you grow up in my shadow. Love. Your mother. I read it 3 times, folded it carefully, placed it in a box with his adoption papers, his first onesie, and the ultrasound photo I'd taken from Lilia's purse that night. Everything came crashing down. One day, when he's old enough, I'll let him read it. I won't shield him from the truth, but I'll help him carry it. Because being a mother means protecting your child, yes, but it also means telling the truth gently and giving them space to decide who they want to become. That night, Cedric and I stood in David's doorway, watching him sleep. He's going to be okay, Cedric whispered. I nodded, we all are. And we were. Not perfect, but whole. Because the thing about broken families is if you're lucky and willing, you can rebuild something stronger in the cracks. And love, real love, doesn't care where you came from. It only cares that you stay. Winter settled gently over our town, with snow dusting the rooftops and frost painting lace patterns on our windows. Inside, the warmth of our rebuilt family radiated more than any fire could. David was walking now wobbly steps, arms outstretched like a little windmill, laughter erupting with every triumphant stride. He'd fall, giggle, and look to us, his cheering squad, ready to try again. I never thought I'd raise a child again at my age, but here I was, tucking him in each night, singing softly even when my voice cracked, and when he called me Mama just once. Before quickly switching to Gamma, I cried in the hallway so no one would see, not because I was sad, but because I had been given something unexpected, a second chance, a legacy not of bitterness, but of love. We celebrated David's 2nd birthday quietly, just a small gathering. Judd, Sarah, Cedric, and me. We strung up blue streamers, baked a lopsided cake, and wrapped presents in reused Christmas paper. David didn't care. He was too busy trying to tear the bows off the boxes and stick them to the dog. At one point, Judd lifted David into the air and said, "Look, buddy, everyone here fought to make sure you'd never feel unwanted. That's your real birthday gift." I couldn't have said it better. As the party wound down and Sarah rocked David to sleep, Cedric stepped outside to clear the snow from the porch. I joined him, our breath fogging in the cold air. "You ever think about how it all started?" he asked. "All the time," I replied. "If I hadn't let things get out of hand with Lilia." "No," I cut in gently. "Don't rewrite it. We were all complicit in some way. Judd with his silence, me with my blind spots, you with your avoidance, but we also came back from it. That's what matters." He nodded slowly. "I still hate her, sometimes." "I don't," I said truthfully. "I pity her, but I'm also grateful." Grateful. She gave us David, she gave Judd the wake-up call he needed, and she gave me the clearest proof that I was stronger than I ever thought. We stood there in the hush of snowfall, the only sound the creak of the porch wood and the occasional bark from the neighbour's dog. Then Cedric said, "You should write it down. You know, the whole story." I looked at him. Why? Because someone out there is living their own version of it right now, and they need to know it's survivable, that you can come out the other side, not just breathing, but living. So I did. I wrote it all down, every twist, every wound, every small miracle. I didn't glamorize the betrayal, I didn't hide the shame, but I made sure to highlight the healing, because that's the part people forget to talk about. I started reading it aloud at the community centre. During storytelling nights, women leaned in, some wept. A few came up after and whispered, "That happened to me too." Judd read it once. He said it hurt, but it helped. Sarah said I should publish it. Cedric just smiled and said, "You found your voice again." One evening, after tucking David in, I sat alone with my tea and read the last lines of what I'd written. Sometimes, the people you love will betray you, and sometimes you will be the one who lets the wrong person in the door. But if you're lucky and brave enough to choose truth over comfort, you'll find your way back. Not to the life you had, but to the one that was waiting to begin once you let go. David stirred in his crib, murmuring something unintelligible but sweet. I placed the pages back in their folder, closed the lamp, slid into bed beside Cedric, who was already snoring softly. Tomorrow, there would be more diapers, more dishes, more phone calls and grocery runs and spilled juice on clean floors. But there would also be laughter and purpose, and the kind of peace that doesn't come from revenge, but from choosing to rise, again and again, with love in your hands. This story doesn't end with a dramatic twist or a courtroom victory. It ends here, with a child sleeping safely, with a family forged in truth, with me, Bessie Holloway, choosing after all this time not just to survive, but to live.